So, Bruce, when we were talking a couple weeks back about the technician crisis, we ended up talking about some of your best practices that you did as an operator and that you encourage your dealers to do as a consultant. And I'm like, man, this is gold. This is the right way to do it. We need to put this down on vinyl. Some people are going to want to buy a copy. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of unpack that with you. And it goes without saying that the technician crisis is not a new problem. It's been a problem for a very long time. The industry as a whole has done a poor job taking care of its technicians to make it a viable career path for somebody, particularly now that they can go, get an entry level job as a software writer for Facebook for $250,000 a year. Now, that's not everybody's career ambition, but the technician crisis long term is only going to be solved by figuring out how to recruit for it properly, how to properly grow a technician and create that career path, and how to properly pay that technician the right way so that they can make a livable wage and know, hey, if I want to get from here to here, here's exactly what I need to do. It's in my control. So you shared with me during that conversation some great advice, and I just wanted to put it down here. So before we get into those best practices, in your opinion, how serious is the technician shortage right now? And what are dealers getting wrong when it comes to how they approach their technicians?
Well, the crisis is very real, and it's only going to get worse for people that are not proactive. It's not going to cure itself. The shortage, which is being talked about by manufacturers, but that's a cruise ship, not a speedboat.
Mhm.
Manufacturers are going to take years if they can ever even help address the program. So you keep the destiny of the problem at your store in your own control and fix it. And you got to forget about everything you're hearing from everybody else. Most people are not doing it right. That's the problem. We have people moving between stores on a mercenary basis. We have people leaving regional areas to move to different parts of the country that are more affordable. Out west, it's extremely tough. California is just a whole nother animal.
It's as bad as it gets.
Yeah. So I think the first thing to do is admit those things.
Mhm.
It's not going to fix itself. People aren't going to stay just because you have a good culture. That helps. But that's not the end all because there's too much warranty work that's absorbing all their time and they're not able to get the extra gravy hours that they deserve on the customer pay.
Yeah.
So what I do when I go into a store is, and I take a look at their turnover. I take a look at the stability of different groups of technicians too. Those are two different things. You're going to have a lot of turnover in the newer guys that are coming up and
Mhm.
learning. Why is that? Because we'd like to keep them because as soon as they learn how to do anything, if you don't have a proactive approach to keeping them, they're going to take their credentials. Well, I've learned how to do this, this, and this and go to another store and make more money.
No doubt.
Okay. So the other thing that, and I'll touch on this real quick, is labor rates have escalated through the roof, as they should. The
Mhm.
manufacturer and the consumers expect everything from us. The manufacturer wants XYZ number of loaner cars.
Mhm.
It's nothing to spend $1 million a year on loaner cars, and, it's got to come from somewhere. So labor rates are going up. We're using the customer paid door rates then to drive the warranty reimbursement, which is almost all states now. So we can't be afraid to pay what it takes to retain people when we're getting 220, 250. I've got stores that are over $300 an hour out in
Me too.
California.
Me too.
25.
Mhm.
Now, when you raise those labor rates up, if you don't take a proactive position with your technicians, you're asking for trouble. They're going to be disgruntled, unhappy. They want not a lion's share of it, but they want a fair piece of the pie. And you got to get your mind right. You just got to say, hey, look, if I went from $185 an hour effective labor rate to 215, and then we plan to keep raising it from there, what are we going to do for our technicians?
Yep.
And for that matter, your advisors too. First,
Before we
acknowledge the problem, understand that it's changed, it's not going to self-correct, and that you have to take a high performance approach. And then you've got to accumulate the data. I can remember working on uh, a very big store with you some years back because I went in and I had, 50 plus technicians and 40 different pay plans.
Mhm.
Insanity. Okay, you can't do that.
Yep.
So the first thing I do is I put a grid together and I want to know what everybody's getting paid and what type of work they're doing and understand the methodology behind how we arrived at so many different pay plans. Well, there is no methodology. Well, Frank asked for a pay raise. Jose asked for a
Yep.
pay raise. Okay, but we didn't do anything for the rest of them. Go ahead.
If you don't mind, Bruce, before we unpack how you'd recommend a dealer approach this proactively, I really want to try to put our finger on the problem, and I think that we can do it. Let me ask you a question. In
Sure.
your experience, how many dealers hire technicians at a certain wage and that wage is probably appropriate for their skill set at the time? And how many dealers just assume that the technician is going to take ownership over increasing their pay simply by producing more hours? That because most car dealers grew up selling cars. They have a commissioned mindset. You want to make more, work harder. You want to make more, produce more. You want to make more, make me more, right? How many dealers in your experience go into it with that mindset that, hey, if you want to make more, just become more efficient and you'll take care of yourself? Is that part of the problem?
It's a big, big part of the problem, but the workload and the spread of work has changed dramatically over the years. So you may have a bunch of guys that are capable of growing their income, but because the workload has changed, they're locked out. They can't hit those same types of numbers they used to 10, 15 years ago.
Absolutely. And then we have our retention problems, right? We have technicians leaving to take their skill sets elsewhere. So this is absolutely a part of why technicians turn over. So let's go ahead and go back to your proactive pay strategy. So please, you're about to unpack that for us.
Sure. So almost every store that I go to has this pay disparity across the entire group, and it
Hmm.
makes no sense. And, technicians are motivated by a couple things. They want fairness. Everybody, all employees, regardless of the department they're in, expect a fair, equal pay program across the board. And they don't understand why let's say it's an average shop of 15 to 20 people. They don't understand why there's uh, 14, 15 different pay programs for people. Why does this guy over here get this, and four of us have four different pay programs? So what I do
Hmm.
is try to simplify it. And the first thing I do is convince dealers and the service directors or managers, whoever's in charge of the department, we don't need to have more than three, possibly four pay groups across the entire shop.
Okay.
Then we can build off of those some extensions of pay for specialty, certain training, but there ought to be no more than three or four groups. Then we're going to explain it to everybody. We're going to make the adjustments. We're going to level out those that are not being paid fairly. And we're going to explain how they get in from this pay level to the next one, then on to the next one, and what the rationale is. Then that's where the pain comes in. A lot of dealers and a lot of managers, oh my God, we're going to give away all these pay raises to these guys, and that's going to hit our bottom line. I go, no, it's not. It has never failed to, motivate the people. Take away the arguments in the shop and make sure that they feel like they've got a legitimate chance and they understand how to go from this group to the next group to the next group. And it also makes sense to them.
You
Hey, if
bet.
they've got a guy that's in the shop four stalls down that's a master, has been there 20 years. He also is a specialist. He's a guy that's doing all the EV batteries, or he's a guy doing all the transmission overhauls. That we've got a guy that's a killer guy in heavy line,
Mhm.
whatever. They don't begrudge that guy as long as the pay groups are explained and they understand we're being proactive. I'll give you a real live example.
Please.
I went into a store 2 years ago that this situation was going on. And I said, look, you got a problem. We got to level out these pay programs across the entire shop. There's going to be a lot of pay raises that go out. And we're going to work on the door rate and the effective labor rate to the advisors and make sure we got the revenue coming in.
Hmm.
Then it won't be so scary. But that's not going to take very long, 3, 4 months. We'll get that going. Then we're going to make sure that these people understand the rationale. We're going to talk to them about it in advance. We're going to talk to them individually. Then we're going to roll these new pay programs out in these groups. in a group session. We did that. The first thing the dealer said, "What's this going to cost me?" I said, "Well, theoretically not going to cost you anything because they'll be motivated and they'll produce more. Production will increase, innovation will be there. But if you want to know what the real math is, it's not as bad as you think. The average shop that's got 15, 20 people, we're looking at maybe 10, 12, $15,000 in pay raises if it just stays the same. But we also put in production bonuses, which I think you've got to make sure you have for the guys that are heavy hitters, know how to do the job.
Yeah.
So this is a 3-4 month process. And when you do it and you explain it and you're open about it and you take care of the wage disparities in the shop, you show them the grid. There's no secrecy.
That's right.
Okay, then there's nobody out here griping, not going over here getting 3 guys talking about it for 2 hours every day, which also is a production killer. Those things go away.
Well, and that's
Now,
part
you
of the
and I
reason
did
it's so
that in that
effective, right?
one real I'm sorry?
That's part of the reason it's so effective, right? I mean, you're buying trust with transparency. You're putting the control in the technician's hands. They feel in control of their own journey. So it cuts down on negative culture. It cuts down on that water cooler talk about Billy's making this and Johnny's making that, but they can do the same thing. That's all out the door. So obviously that means it's important to tie those groups, that structure back to something that the technician can control. And ideally, these would also be things that directly benefit the business, right? So, what are some examples of those things when you're building these comp plans? What are the KPIs or the measurables the technician can produce other than efficiency to increase their wage and give them more opportunities?
Well, in California, again, for instance, it's tough because they're guaranteed 40 hours for showing
Right.
up, and you may have 60% of your shop below 40 hours. But if you have rationale in the pay programs and it's explained, then what does that give you the opportunity to do that you can't do now? You're
Mhm.
scared to go out and put pressure on them. They'll quit.
That's right.
All of a sudden, well, look, we're going to pay you this per hour. You're going to get an automatic pay raise. We're also going to do annual increases, cost of living adjustments. They'll happen every January. But with this, when we come to you, if you're a 50% efficient guy, we're going to start coming to you and saying, every 90 days, we expect a 10% increase. We expect then in another 90 days after another 10% increase. We need to wake up at the end of the year where a 90 to 100 to 110% efficient guy, if we're going to pay you
Mhm.
and we're going to be open about the pay, you also then it becomes a management tool. It's not just a pay program, it becomes a management tool. You have credibility, you have openness, and you have the ability then to what? Land pressure on people that are underperforming. Let's face it, we got a lot of people showing up for the 40 hours and the benefits. And then you can begin to call out the herd if you have some really bad people. Because what happens with the rest of the shop? They get behind it. They understand, hey, Nick is fair, Bruce is fair, they pay more than fair. And there are 3 or 4 guys here that either need to get it on or they need to be gone. Now, I'll give you
Yep.
an example. I walked into a store and the first day, as I went in and interviewed these technicians and just, hey, how do you feel? What's going on? One of the master techs that had been there for like 14 years said, truth is, half of these guys ought to be fired, and nobody even tries to manage them. He
Okay.
says it's unacceptable. He said, if I was king for a day, half of them would be gone. Well, the problem is, unless you've got a solution to turn those hours, even if he's a lower efficiency guy, you're scared to manage him.
That's right.
Well, get the pay right. Get
Yep.
the pay right and put these newer groups together. And I'll tell you what it is. It's real simple. The lube people, that's one pay group that's different. I consider them not the main shop.
Mhm.
Okay, California, if they've got their own tools, it's a double minimum. Well, I got news for you. You got to pay that and maybe have some production bonuses on top of it to make sure they're motivated to turn the lube oil filter rack in a timely way.
Mhm.
That's one group.
Okay.
But then you have what I consider the entry group, the guys that have come off the lube oil filter rack. He's a new guy. He's a green guy. That's an entry position. So that's your first level of pay program. What do they need to be? They need to be paid above the average in the market. So as they learn, they don't begin to shop themselves.
Mhm.
Then the next group is what I call general cleanup. They're not a master tech, but they're a good solid guy. That's another group. And then you have the master group. Then in the master group, you can begin to say there are some different addendums to those guys as well. There are specialists within the master group. Now, for instance, if you're a master in California with a brand where the work is difficult, those guys are now commanding $75 an hour
Mhm.
easily in the
Yes, they
market.
are.
People don't want to pay it, but then they wonder why they can't get the work out, or they can't recruit people, or they can't keep them. Come on. If
Yep.
you've got $280 an hour door rate for transmission work, are you afraid to pay 70, 75 for that guy? If he's really good and he's highly efficient, who cares?
That's
So
right.
part of it is a mentality. You got to change your mindset. Instead of being a cost oriented manager, you got to be a production oriented manager. And you can't do it without the heavy hitters.
Well, and let's say that heavy hitter who market would dictate is going to make $75 per hour. Let's say that we mishandle that person's pay plan. And here's, in a 40-hour work week, this person can turn 60 hours of that type of work with the type of margins that we're used to seeing. What's that stall worth? What does the dealer lose from a gross profit perspective if that technician leaves? I mean, what's the number, Bruce? What's the average stall producing? Or what do you hope for the stall to produce?
Well, if he's a really strong guy, I'm seeing techs that are, if the work is sold right by the advisors, and if the shop is managed properly, I want from that guy that's making $75 an hour, 160 to 200% efficiencies. Now, what's crazy is a dealer will go, that guy's making $250,000 this year. And my answer is, so what?
So
What did
what?
you make off of it?
Yep.
You ought to hope that every single technician in the shop makes 180, $200,000 minimum. The more they make, the more you make. We're on a 75% gross profit margin on every stall. What I tell people is every empty stall you have is a roughly 30 to $40,000, depending on your door rates and effective labor rates.
There's the number I was
Goes to
looking
the
for.
bottom line,
Yep.
and you've left it empty because you're afraid to pay enough to bring somebody in.
So a technician in that stall could produce $30,000 to $40,000 worth of gross for that dealer, and we're stressing about $10 an hour. What are we doing? Yeah.
Now,
What are we What are we
every
doing?
single dealer that I work with now is having record fixed operation numbers, despite the fact that we've leveled out the pay groups. We have no more than 3 or 4 pay groups, and every technician is making more money. They're not out shopping themselves in the market. They're happy, they're satisfied, and then all of a sudden, the department's making money or a lot more money than it used to make. I've got some stores where we're looking at 1,000,000 to 1,500,000 a year difference, depending on the size, and that's carrying the stores. Great news in a tough new car market, right?
No doubt
That's
about it.
exactly what we need to happen, not to mention the parts that come along with it. And I'll say this real briefly. When I was a young guy in the business, I used to teach it as the 40-40 rule. For every hour of labor you sold, you got 40% of it at a 40% margin. Well, it's even higher than that now. So don't forget the parts equation
That's
is
right.
probably more like 50-50. And so that is another profit center when a guy is highly effective on his stall. He's making you a ton of money in labor, and he's bringing the parts department along with it.
Now, one of the things that you brought up when we were speaking recently that I thought was so true, and it's just a trap that a car dealer needs to avoid is, if a car dealer is not proactive, and they have a culture in their shop where a technician shops their wage, realizes they can go down the street and make 5, 10, $15 more, whatever the number is, and either threatens to leave or puts in their notice. I mean, talk about what happens after that and how that can kind of spiral into a place the dealer doesn't want to be.
I'll give you an example from this week alone.
Okay.
I know a dealer who I don't consult, but I talk to people all through the industry that had a technician that was shopping himself all over town because, for good reason, the management in the store was not proactive. They weren't selling work, just a poor operation. And he called me up for an opinion. He says, hey, this guy's looking at going to possibly another store. He's talking to 2 or 3 people. And he says, I'm going to have to do 2 things for him to keep him. I said, what are they? And I'm not going to give you his name. Somebody
Mm.
might figure it out. He said, well, I'm going to have to raise his pay at least $10 an hour or more. And he wants a helper. I said, oh, what are you going to do if you do that? He comes back or stays, and all of a sudden, there's no secrets in a service department. Every
Nope.
single guy knows what everybody else makes,
Mhm.
okay? You're gonna bump him, then you've got typically 4 or 5 other guys in a shop that size that have equal abilities. What are they gonna do? They're gonna come calling.
Mhm.
"Hey, I want the same thing." Well, then you've got a real problem on your hands. The best way to handle that is to have a proactive
Yep.
situation where you talk to everybody and cure the problem instead of just curing one guy. You have to cure everybody.
That's right. That's right. So, I mean, really, my biggest takeaway from the conversation is taking that proactive approach to your technicians' pay is one of the best things you could do, not just for the culture of your service department, but to also build a stronger pipeline of technicians for the future. Because very few car dealers, in my experience, are managing their technician pay approach the way you're talking about. If a dealer starts doing it, chances are they're one of the only dealers in their marketplace that is, and it's not going to take long for that buzz to get around. And now you're building your bench, and just that culture is going to be the Pied Piper of bringing those technicians to your door for opportunities.
Well, there's one other thing I wanted to bring up too, and it's the opposite of having 35, 40 different pay plans.
Mhm.
I went into a dealership a couple years ago where they had a very strict single pay program for the main shop across the board. Everybody was paid the same. But again, you've got to have 2, 3, 4 levels
Right.
because there's specialization in these stores. So you can have the opposite, which is, "Hey, we've been doing this for 10 years. We don't adjust pay for this. We don't." And I said, "Okay, how many empty stalls do you have?" "Well, we got 5 stalls." "Okay. Back to the $40,000 a stall. You're missing $200,000, but we can't recruit anybody." "Okay, that's because you're way below the market." You've got to know the market. You have to understand that the market is dynamic and it's changing almost every 90 days lately. I'm seeing ridiculous numbers being thrown out. Now, you're going to have to let a mercenary go every once in a while, right?
Yes.
Especially if he's not talented.
Yes.
But by being proactive across the board, having these categories and making sure you step up and announcing that from now on, you'll never have to wait for a cost of living adjustment, the COLA, that we're automatically going to raise according to the government COLA adjustment equal to Social Security, which probably isn't enough, but at least it's 2% on average. You're never going to have to ask again every January. Guess what? You get a pay raise. Now, there's another thing that you can add that will help with production. Some people do it and a lot of people don't. I put it in the entire groups that I've managed across the board. Where you have states that have benefits for when you're sick, you get paid.
Mhm.
Okay. Let me tell you what the utilization is. It's 100%. Becomes a benefit. It's not about being sick and being paid. It's a vacation days. If it's 5 days a year, then they're going to take their 5 days. They're going to bookend it against vacations and holidays and everything else. Production killer. So what I did was made sure that they saw it as a benefit not to call out sick. If you're sick, you're sick. And we would explain that to them. Now, what we did was we said all unused sick days, we paid at full rate. Well, the first year we'd have usually a 50% reduction in the use of sick days. By the second and third years, it was about 80%. You're still going to have some sick days.
Of course.
You start adding 40 technicians with another 4 days a year. It's simple math. It's an easy way to win. So you got to be proactive on pay. You got to look at benefits. More importantly, take a real hard look at advisors. And this is a big, big part of retaining technicians. If you have a poor group of advisors that don't know how to sell,
Yep.
it's an impossibility to pay your technicians enough to keep them happy. And it's a math problem that won't work out.
No doubt.
So there's this second part to this. You got to do what's right by the technicians. You got to make sure that you're competitive, overly competitive. Your door rates will more than make up for it. The math will work. Don't worry about it. And then take a look at the advisors and make sure that they know how to sell work. And most of the time, they do not.
Yeah.
And that's part of the dilemma. So we recommend, and I know you do too, that we have consistent training methods and classes to sell customer pay work. We've talked about it on another video before, but if you're not training advisors on a regular basis, a minimum of 2 times a year, but it's better if it's 3 or 4, and remind them of the selling steps and how to approach people, how to talk to people, and make sure that you explain things and you use the multi-point inspection tools you have. But you get organized before you talk to people and you're willing, especially again with females, they love it if we'll take the time to explain in great detail what it is that's wrong with their car and why they need to spend these dollars. It just makes common sense that it's a credibility issue. So
Agreed.
we teach credibility, we teach that it's organization, and it's about the approach to the customer and adding all those value items to make sure that we sell the work. Now, if you want to know, again, we've talked about this on a video we did before, who the lousy advisors are in your driveway that don't sell, just go ask the technicians. They know exactly who they are.
Absolutely.
They don't even attempt to sell the work to those guys. The guys that do sell, then the technicians take a completely different approach. So you got to make things right with the techs. You got to consolidate these pay programs into groups that make sense, articulate it to them, and then you've got to address the advisors and make sure that they're trained up and that you're getting what you should get from these people. Last quick story about advisors. I had a group in a store that was a Highline store and their RO average is 1.8, 1.9 every month. So we went through this, all these things we've just talked about, and we added service advisor training, the very detailed. And you know what their advisor group average is now? On a bad month is 2.8, and on a good month,
Strong.
3.1, 3.2.
Oh my gosh, what that does
Now
for the
you combine
economics of the
that with
floor,
high
crazy.
effective labor rates,
Let's
and then
go.
you combine that with motivated technicians, that's where the $1 million a year comes from.
No doubt about it. Now, that's the perfect springboard to transition into our next topic, Bruce. But before we do, if just last question about the technician proactive pay approach. If anybody watched this and enjoyed it and they're like, man, I get it. You're right. It's important. I need to change, but they don't know where to start. Is it safe for that person to assume that that's one of the services that you offer through ADO Consulting, coming in, doing a market analysis to identify what's the market base rate for a particular pay type of technician, being able to carve their shop into 3 or 4 groups that make sense, create the documentation? Is that something you can help a dealer with from A to Z?
All the time. You know, I would tell you this, no pressure, no diamonds. If it doesn't work at your store, it'll be the first time it never worked.
No pressure, no diamonds. I am ripping that off. That is one of the best Bruceisms I've ever heard.
That's it.